What if I told you that the ones who appear the strongest, those who carry others, lead quietly, and hold it all together, are often the ones who feel the most alone? Carl Jung believed this wasn't a weakness. He believed it was the cost of becoming your true self. You don't notice them at first. The strong ones. They're not the loudest. They're not the ones constantly asking for help, constantly breaking down in public, constantly demanding attention. They're the quiet carriers, the ones who seem to handle everything life throws at them. But here's what Jung knew: that kind of strength is deceptive, because beneath that steady surface, there is often a war no one sees. Carl Jung believed that the strongest souls often walk alone, not because they want to, but because they have no other choice. Because once you begin to walk the path of individuation, the psychological and spiritual journey to become your truest self, you will inevitably outgrow people, places, and paradigms that once made you feel safe. Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." That quote hits like a thunderclap, because the strongest people, they're usually the ones who've seen too much, felt too deeply, held pain that would shatter others. And so, they stop talking. Not because they don't want to, but because when you've experienced life on such a deep level, you realize most won't understand. Most don't want to. Most live on the surface. The strong ones aren't born that way. They're forged by betrayal, by trauma, by silence. They learned to be strong because they had to be, and somewhere along the way, they got tired of explaining their depth to those who only swim in shallow waters, so they stopped. They became quiet, not weak, wise. They started listening more, observing, trusting themselves. And here's the hidden truth Jung hinted at again and again. When you start listening to your soul instead of the noise of the world, you will become isolated, not because you are broken, but because the world is addicted to illusion, and you've chosen truth. This is what Jung called the journey of the self. The self is not the ego. The ego wants attention, validation, control. The self seeks truth, integrity, wholeness. And here's the secret: the stronger your self becomes, the more you'll notice the world resisting it. Why? Because your strength becomes a mirror. Your calmness exposes other people's chaos. Your boundaries make others confront their lack of them. Your silence makes their noise feel louder. This is why so many strong souls feel alienated. It's not that they're misunderstood on accident. It's that their very presence threatens the illusions others are clinging to. And Jung knew most people would rather cling to the comfort of illusion than face the discomfort of truth. So, what does the strong person do? They withdraw. They retreat inward. Not out of weakness, but to preserve their energy, to protect their peace, to stay aligned with the self. They learn to enjoy solitude, not because they hate people, but because they value authenticity. And until they find someone who speaks from the soul, silence becomes a sacred friend. But don't mistake that solitude for suffering. Jung would tell you that aloneness is the cocoon from which true transformation emerges. It's in those silent moments, when the world fades, when the applause stops, when the distractions die, that you finally meet your real self. And that self, it is not fragile, it is not desperate, it does not need to prove anything. It simply is, unshaken, unapologetic, unstoppable. But let's be clear, this journey is not easy. There will be moments when the loneliness is loud, when the silence feels heavy, when you question everything. But those are the sacred thresholds of transformation. Carl Jung believed that every human being must eventually face what he called the shadow, the denied parts of the psyche. And here's the twist. The stronger you are, the more powerful your shadow becomes. Why? Because you've built a life of control, of competence, of calm. But underneath that, rage, grief, desire, fear, and it's only in solitude, when the masks fall, that you can confront those hidden layers. The strong ones are not strong because they've never fallen. They're strong because they've faced the fall, integrated it, and stood back up. Eyes open, heart open, soul intact. They've walked through their own darkness and emerged more whole, not less. And that's what separates them from the crowd. Not their muscles, not their titles, not their money, but their depth, their willingness to be with what is uncomfortable, raw, and real. And yes, that path is often lonely. But here's the alchemy Jung believed in. If you keep walking it, if you keep choosing the truth over comfort, if you keep showing up as your full self, you will eventually find others, not many, but a few. Others who have bled, questioned, shattered, and rebuilt. Others who speak not from the ego, but from the soul. And when strong people find each other, they don't need to speak loudly. There's a quiet recognition, a knowing, a shared fire. So if you're watching this, and you felt like you carry too much, love too hard, feel too deeply, and are always alone in rooms full of people, you're not broken. You're just further along. Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll dive into the exact psychological mechanism Jung uncovered that explains why the deeper your growth, the lonelier your journey becomes, and how that loneliness becomes your spiritual strength. The truth is, most people are not equipped to handle depth. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He spent decades studying, not just the surface mind, but the unconscious, and what he found terrified him. Not because it was evil, but because it was real, raw, unfiltered, shadowed. And when you have the strength to explore that inner world, you automatically separate yourself from most of society. Because strength, real, spiritual strength, isn't loud. It isn't dominating. It isn't forceful. It's the courage to look within. Jung described individuation as a sacred path, a calling to become your whole self, not the version others want, not the version the ego creates, but the full integrated self. That includes your light, your power, your goodness, but also your darkness, your wounds, your rage, your hunger. And here's the paradox. The more you integrate your shadow, the more whole you become. But the more whole you become, the more isolated you might feel. Because integration is not popular. Integration requires facing pain. It means admitting you've been pretending. It means letting go of the roles. The perfect one, the peacemaker, the strong friend. And most people around you, they're still clinging to those roles. Desperate to be liked. Desperate to belong. Desperate to be seen. But not you. You've started seeing yourself, and that changes everything. That's when the loneliness sets in. Not because no one is around, but because few can meet you at your level of awareness. You speak in truths, they speak in scripts. You see patterns, they see personalities. You want evolution, they want entertainment. And slowly, the room starts to feel colder, not because you don't care, but because you finally do. You care enough about your soul to stop pretending you're okay in places where your spirit is starving. This is what Jung meant when he said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." When you pass through that inferno, when you feel the abandonment, the disappointment, the betrayal, the guilt, and choose to stay awake, you emerge with clarity. But clarity is lonely, because now you see the masks, the illusions, the roles, and you can't go back. That's the curse and the blessing of awakening. It changes how you walk into rooms. You no longer seek attention. You no longer beg to be liked. You no longer perform for acceptance. You're just present, rooted. And that kind of presence makes people uncomfortable. They don't know why, but they feel it. Because you're not operating in the old game anymore. Jung believed that few things were more dangerous than a society addicted to conformity. And strong people, the truly strong, are often rejected, not because they're flawed, but because they refuse to shrink into what's familiar. That's what your loneliness is. It's not failure. It's not punishment. It's a spiritual detox. You're shedding everything that was never real. That smile you forced, that laugh you faked, that conversation you endured. Gone. And now, the silence. The echo of your own voice, the sobering realization that you've outgrown the old world, but haven't yet found the new one. That's where many break down. But Jung would tell you, this is the threshold, the moment before the emergence. The loneliness you feel now, it's not emptiness, it's space. Space being made for people who match your truth. Space for relationships that don't demand a watered-down version of you. Space for purpose that doesn't drain you. It fuels you. But here's the hard part. To reach that space, you must endure the in-between. The desert between identity and destiny. And in that desert, you will be tested. Not with failure, but with silence. With the quiet echo of your own thoughts. With long days where no one texts, no one understands, no one gets it. You'll start to wonder, is it worth it? And that's where you must remember what Jung knew, what he taught the world in hushed tones and handwritten pages. The soul does not evolve in comfort. The soul evolves through solitude, because only in solitude do we stop playing roles and start becoming real. The strongest people you'll ever meet have walked through this fire. They've sat in rooms alone, crying, doubting, unraveling. They've questioned everything: God, life, their purpose. And still they rise, not with bitterness, but with depth, with eyes that have seen darkness, and still choose light, with hearts that have been shattered and still choose love, with minds that have been overwhelmed and still choose presence. That's strength, not the strength of muscles or money or control, but the strength of self-knowledge, of self-ownership, of soul alignment. And yes, it's lonely. But that loneliness is sacred. It means you're on the path, the real path, the one no one applauds, the one no one posts about, the one that transforms you from the inside out. And in the next part, we'll go even deeper into how embracing that loneliness becomes the very key that unlocks your hidden gifts, and how Carl Jung's most suppressed insights reveal that your isolation might be preparing you for your highest calling. Are you ready to hear it? You didn't ask to feel this much, to see this clearly, to carry this much weight in silence. But here you are, awake, alone, strong, and Carl Jung would tell you, it's not a coincidence. It's a calling. The loneliness you feel now, it's not the result of something being wrong with you. It's the result of something being right, something awakening, something ancient, powerful, and authentic that the world often suppresses: your inner self. Jung believed that the soul doesn't evolve through constant connection with others, but through encounters with the unconscious, with your inner world, with your own pain, your own voice, your own truth. And in that inner sanctuary, you start to hear the whispers of what Jung called the archetypes. Not fiction, not fantasy, but primal energies that shape human behavior. The warrior, the lover, the sage, the orphan, the ruler, the magician, and one of them, the one most relevant to you now, is the seeker. The seeker is the one who cannot accept surface-level answers. The seeker refuses to settle. The seeker sacrifices comfort for meaning, and the seeker is almost always alone, because the seeker's path takes them off the beaten road, away from convention, into the dark, the unknown, the mystical. Sound familiar? Jung saw it again and again. Those who were called to transformation were first called to separation, from their families, from their communities, from their former selves. It's not personal. It's necessary, because when you are surrounded by voices that want you to stay small, to stay familiar, to stay safe, you cannot grow. The cocoon must break, the environment must shift, the silence must fall, and in that silence, something sacred happens. You begin to notice things you never saw before. How you used to betray yourself just to keep the peace. How you laughed at jokes that hurt you, nodded at ideas that insulted your spirit, stayed in rooms that suffocated your truth. And now, you can't. Not because you're angry, but because your soul won't let you. You've become too conscious, and consciousness has a cost. Exile. Not physical exile, but energetic. You walk through familiar places and feel like a stranger. You hear familiar voices and feel unseen. You scroll through the world and feel like you're not a part of it anymore. That's because you're not. You're not meant to be. Not in the old way. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires the death of the persona, the mask we wear to survive. And when that mask falls, so do the illusions. You see that your friendship was actually a trauma bond. You see that your career was actually a cage. You see that your strength was actually a strategy to avoid being abandoned. And this collapse, this identity death, leaves you raw, unprotected, and yes, profoundly alone. But here's the secret. This is not the end. This is the beginning, because only when you've stripped away everything false can you begin to build something true, something solid, something sacred, something unstoppable. And this is where your gifts emerge. The strongest people often feel alone not because they are weak, but because their perception pierces through the veil. They see the pain behind the smile. They feel the tension in the silence. They hear what others don't say. They are intuitives, and intuition is not random. It's a refined skill, a heightened perception, a sensitivity born of suffering. You earned your intuition by listening to your pain, to your instincts, to your soul. You were trained by loneliness to trust your inner voice. That's why you can walk into a room and feel the energy shift. That's why you can sense betrayal before it happens. That's why you can spot manipulation beneath a compliment. You are not paranoid, you are awake, and this awareness is your power. But Jung warned, if you don't integrate it, it can consume you, because seeing so much, feeling so much, knowing so much, without the ability to share it, that can become a burden. And that's where many strong people begin to shrink. They stop speaking, they stop sharing, they stop shining, because they think, what's the point if no one understands? But Jung would say, that's the moment where your strength is tested. Not in the moment you break, but in the moment you're tempted to dim your light, just to be accepted. That's the real danger, because the world needs your light. It needs your wisdom. It needs your courage to feel alone and still walk forward. To trust your truth even when others mock it. To be the seeker even when everyone else settles. So the question is, will you choose comfort or calling? Will you numb yourself with distractions and applause, or will you stand in the holy silence of your own becoming? Because that silence, that aloneness, it's not empty. It's full of you. It's full of your ancestors. It's full of every version of you that was silenced, ignored, neglected, and is now rising. This is not isolation. It's initiation. And if you stay with it, something incredible happens. You stop waiting for someone to see you. You start seeing yourself. You stop waiting for someone to save you. You start remembering you were always the one. Carl Jung didn't just study the soul, he walked through the fires of his own. He lost friends. He lost credibility. He walked away from the fame of Freud. Why? Because his soul demanded it. He chose the truth over the crowd. He chose the self over the ego. He chose the journey, lonely as it was, over the safety of illusion. And look what he left behind: a map, a mirror, a message. for people like you, for the strong, for the seekers, for the ones who feel too much, know too much, love too much, and still rise. In the next part, we'll explore the final layer of Jung's wisdom, how your aloneness is not the end of your story. It is the bridge to your greatest power, your highest relationships, and your ultimate return, not to who you were, but to who you truly are. So here you are, not broken, not abandoned, not invisible, but becoming. Carl Jung believed that the individual's journey through loneliness wasn't a detour, it was the path itself, a sacred rite, a spiritual metamorphosis that couldn't be rushed, skipped, or softened. Because in that silence, in that aching distance between you and the world, something ancient awakens. The true self, not the version people liked, not the version you performed, but the real you, the one you were before the world told you who to be. And now that you've walked through the desert, sat with the ache, endured the nights without answers, you begin to notice something. You're no longer searching for someone to save you. You're no longer obsessed with proving yourself. You're no longer willing to betray your peace just to belong. Because you realize your power was never in being understood, it was in understanding yourself. And from that place, something extraordinary happens. You attract differently, you speak differently, you move differently, because you're not chasing, you're resonating, you're not begging to be seen, you're revealing what's already whole. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not isolation, not superiority, but wholeness. Integration, not escaping the shadow, but dancing with it, not erasing the pain, but honoring its message, not silencing the soul, but letting it lead. And as you do this, the loneliness that once felt like exile becomes a sanctuary, not a prison, but a temple, a place where you meet your own soul in stillness, a place where you begin to remember what the world made you forget, that strength isn't in the armor, it's in the openness, that power isn't in control, it's in truth, that love isn't in approval, it's in alignment. You no longer walk with a mask, you no longer shrink to fit, you no longer fake the laugh or hide the tears. You are not trying to be light, you are light. And when you carry that light, something shifts in the universe. You begin to meet people who see you, not the costume, not the performance. You, the seekers, find each other. The deep souls align. The ones who have been cracked open begin to recognize the divine in one another, because once you've walked through the dark night of the soul, you no longer fear the darkness in others. You honor it. You welcome it. You help them rise through it. You become a mirror, not just of pain, but of possibility. That's what the world is aching for now. Not more masks, not more noise, but real ones, strong ones, silent warriors of the spirit who've walked through fire and chosen love over bitterness, who've lost everything familiar and still chose to rebuild from truth, who've faced the void and didn't flinch. This is the kind of strength that doesn't shout. It radiates. This is the kind of soul that doesn't need a crowd. It creates impact through presence.